Donald had given me one of his tri-fin eggs in the late 90s, 97, 98. Joel Tudor, who was on the team at the time, was doing a bunch of Wayne Lynch-inspired boards. He had one called the Flow Model, which I didn't care for. It was a single fin. And Donald's like, just get on the tri-fin. It's more your speed. Mm-hmm. Blew my mind. I was so stoked on it. Because I liked the movie Cosmic Children, mm-hmm. and I always loved the surfing that was done at Honolulu Bay with Jeff Hackman.
Yeah.
And Barry Kanaiapuni at Sunset Beach. I think maybe some of it was Haleiwa. I can't quite remember. And I wanted to draw those kinds of lines. Even though I was a longboarder, I really wanted to draw those 70s lines. And that's what these egg boards did really well.
Are you ready, boys? Start swimming.
That's Devon Howard. I'm Jamie Brissack. This is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Costa Sunglasses, Finisterre, Freefly, Howler Brothers, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, the Journal delivers 136 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more and to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. This episode of Soundings is proudly presented by Rainbow Sandals. 50 years ago, surfer Sparky Longley was so frustrated with all the poorly made sandals he found broken and forgotten in the sand that, with just a few $100s to his name, he bought a sewing machine, formulated his own glue and rubber, and set out to make something better. The result was Rainbow Sandals. That same attention to material, construction, and longevity continues to define each and every pair. Head over to rainbowsandals.com to pick up yours. Born and raised in San Diego, Devon Howard came to surfing at age 7. He gravitated to longboarding, both the wave riding approach and the culture. A graduate of the University of San Diego, he served as managing editor of Longboard magazine from 1999 to 2004. For the next decade or so, he worked as a freelance writer and photographer and held marketing positions with Patagonia and Spy Optic. But he never let his surfing slip. He competed in pro longboarding events in the 1990s, then did the short-lived ASP Longboard Tour through the early aughts. He appeared in several surf films, The Seedling, Sprout, One California Day, Single Fin Yellow, and Self-Discovery for Social Survival. In 2014, at age 40, he won the Deus 9-foot and single contest in Bali. I first met Devon in the late 1990s. I was living in North County, San Diego at the time, where he was one of the region's finest surfers. Then as now, Devon let his surfing do the talking. Today we know of him as an ace longboarder, and perhaps most of all, as a proponent of the egg or mid design. Husband, father of 3, Ventura resident, and now global marketing director for Channel Islands, Devon and I spoke in the conference room of CI's Carpinteria headquarters. When I say that we were surrounded by surfboards, I mean a huge factory full, well over 1,000. Among them was the board Tom Curran rode to his first world title at Bell's in 1986, and the board Kelly Slater rode to win the Trestles event in 1990, and Dane Reynolds' boards, and Rob Machado's boards, and Mikey February's boards, and Lakey Peterson's boards. It was almost dizzying to think where these boards had gone. So welcome to the show, Devon.
Oh, well, thank you, Jamie. It's good to be here.
I know of you as a guy whose clips I watch and admire tremendously what you're doing on the wave. When I first met you, I knew you could surf, but I didn't know you were a great surfer. And so, thinking about sort of folks who will come to you now, they don't know where you came from necessarily. Where did it start from you? Who were you? Who were the surfers that influenced you? What was your sort of early education like?
Well, my mom surfed, so we had Surfer magazine in the house since before I can remember. And a lot of time at the beach with Mom. My brother and I rode boogie boards, a very typical Southern California, second generation surfer story. And initially wasn't that psyched on surfing. And I don't know, I'd say mid-elementary school, buddy got into surfing, and then it just starts ramping up from there. So I was looking at and sort of consuming what everybody was in the mid-'80s. Surfer Magazine, ESPN, Hot Summer Nights, that sort of thing, Prime Ticket. Everything was geared toward shortboarding and ripping and kind of what every other kid was into. And then I was a teenager, got interested in longboard surfing, which was really an obtuse sort of pursuit. It was like, that's for old people and it's lame.
Yeah.
But strangely enough, I found it appealing. People have heard this part of my life story before, some places, but I always have to acknowledge it. Joel Tudor was a neighbor. I was actually friends with his older brother, Josh. We're 2 years older than Joel. And I had a back injury. I was out for 6 months, and I was with their whole family at San Onofre. And I'm like, give me that longboard. I'm just going to go start farting around, even though I don't have the green light from the dock. I had a fractured L5 3 places. Stupid accident, jumped off a roof. I'm fine. And I rode a longboard the first time. I was like, whoa, okay, there's something to this. And that started a whole pursuit from about age 14 onward. And, got into club contests and do what other kids do, competing. And then I got to college and was like, okay, what am I going to do with my life? And when I got out, I got my first job at Longboard Magazine. I was an intern. And that sort of started, I'd say that put me on a path for the rest of my life from there.
That period was interesting because I think there was obviously the longboard era that was only the longboard era, and then there was a shortboard revolution, and then things moved towards shortboarding, and there were contests, and there were the 70s, and then there was in 1976 the birth of the IPS, in 1983 I believe it was, the ASP, and so you came into that. But it's interesting because that kind of renaissance of which Joel Tudor for sure was sort of spearheaded, and he was cool. He was younger. He kind of made longboarding cool, at least in my perceptions. He sort of probably brought something to it that made kids more likely to take that up. It was also a time when the surf industry had undergone this recession and a drop, really. The magazines got thinner, and it was a kind of shift in the zeitgeist. When you landed at Longboard Magazine, where was the industry for longboarding at that time?
Well, it was at the helm was Scott Hewlett, who's now been at the Journal for how long? 25 years. He's been there for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think it was in a healthy, optimistic place, but it was always lower rung. It was always kind of desperate for relevance. If anyone cares about the magazine business, it relies on subscribers and advertising. So what advertising was available was really just through the board builders, and the clothing industry at large was not interested at all. So it was really a grassroots effort. And clearly, because it was in business that long, there were enough people that believed in it. But it always was going to struggle to be something bigger, so long as the surf industry, really the clothing companies, didn't have a whole lot of interest in supporting longboarding, because the perception was it was for old guys, and old guys weren't really the cornerstone of the market. It was youth. And everybody was kind of dug into youth against establishment. You look at all the marketing from almost every company, they all fancied themselves as youth against establishment or progression. And longboarding was the opposite of that, really.
Yes. Being in the editorial trenches, you would have, you were shooting, you were writing, you were probably picking photographs, writing captions, all that kind of stuff. Did you have any idea? I mean, did you have ambitions as a surfer yourself, or were you more were you surrendered or resigned to being sort of behind the scenes?
Yeah, I was always just kind of an okay surfer, I'd say above average or good enough to hang with the good guys and girls. but I never had a vision of myself being good enough to be a professional surfer, or just that be my only thing. So I saw the magazine job as a gift, as a way to be a bit of a surf bum, to just get by enough so that I could surf as much as possible. And that job absolutely facilitated that. Because imagine, like, if you like to write at all, to get to write about something you really love, it didn't feel like work to me. I would stay up all night. Well, I was also very young. I would write and write and write because we had a small staff and small budgets. So I would do a lot of ghostwriting. I'd write a lot of features in there that people didn't know I was writing. I was writing them. It was, I don't know, it was weird. It was like kind of like a Mickey Dora scam to me. I was like, you guys really want to pay me to write about something I love to do, and you're going to fund trips to Jeffreys Bay and Australia and all these places? And my mom and dad were stoked. Like, they're like, yeah, our son made it. Like, he went to college and he's utilizing his education with something he really loves. And because my mom was a surfer and I came from a surf family, it just seemed like a huge win. And I thought, man, this is it. I'm going to do this for 30 years.
And when you were doing that, were there any stories that were really interesting to you? Were there any sort of profiles you wrote or read that passed through and were featured in the magazine at that time? What was striking to you at that time?
So many. Well, we can come back to the youth aspect, because I was really most excited about the youth, people my age. You know, I was in my mid-20s at the time. So anybody that was a sort of a teenager to late 20s, I really wanted to tell their story, because I was inspired by them. But it was the older folks that are now not even with us anymore. The profiles that I got to do and learn about these people on an intimate level and become friends with them. Jock Sutherland was one of the early first few legendary characters. And he just, if you know anything about Jock, has he been on your podcast?
Yes, he has.
Yeah, so
He's
your listeners
incredible.
would be familiar with him.
Yeah.
Just absolutely swept me away.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa. And his surfing at the time, gosh, this would have been 1999 or something like that, so 25, 26 years ago. He was technically pretty old then by the standards of how we view age and surfing, like as far as being able to rip at a high level. He was a sort of a blueprint for me to follow, because he was charging so hard. He would have been, in his mid-50s or something?
I would guess.
And so spry.
Yeah.
Switch stance on double overhead waves, out surfing me, out paddling most everyone in the lineup. So I'd say that was one of the most memorable ones, because it was the first few issues I was there. So it helped me build some confidence and excitement to continue on with this. Legendary characters. One of the stories I really enjoyed doing was the history of San Onofre, and learning about the foundation of the whole place, and the relationship of the club with the military, and how close they were to losing access to that break. And that would have really changed the trajectory of surf culture in a lot of ways in Southern California, because it was such a hub for that.
Yeah.
You think of all the families, the Pasquets, everybody that grew up down there.
Yeah. And so many people learned to surf there as well.
Absolutely. Larry Gordon. I mean, I could just go on forever. And then the contemporary guys and girls got to hang with that were already friends that I surfed with. The Jamie Gamboas and Josh Farbros and Tudor and Kevin Connolly, and I can go on and on. It's kind of a blur. If I ever stop and think about how much was written during that period, I don't know how I did it, and I don't know if I could do that again. Do you ever think about things you wrote 25 years ago and how prolific? And it's like, man, could I match that energy when I'm 25 as I am now at 51?
Yeah. No, it is all a blur. And I look back and there are pieces I've forgotten I've written, and there are bits of information that I've totally forgotten that once were lodged in my head. One thing I did find, though, is I think it was 2006, I wrote a profile of the Marshall brothers from Malibu. And it was, I think, the first time I'd written a profile of longboarders. And what I learned from this which was, glaringly obvious, but I just didn't see, but it was in spending time with them, is that because there wasn't a lot of money in longboarding, probably today still, but definitely at the time that they came up, there was a level of fun. And I remember them talking about, going to the Noosa event that happens every year, flying all the way over there and like pulling an all-nighter the night they arrived and almost missing their heats. And it wasn't me having grown up in the shortboard competitive ranks. I mean, in the era that I was in, there was tons of partying and lots of fun. I don't mean to pretend that it wasn't, but it was also like fairly serious. The stakes were raised a little bit. And I think somehow, this is a sweeping generalization, but the having less money in it allowed for more character, more fun, more playfulness.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't tainted by the egos couldn't really get out of whack because there wasn't really anything truly at stake. Sometimes the egos get out of whack in spaces where there's a lot of people trying to protect business or reputation or carving out their space.
Yeah.
Where I think, I wouldn't say it's a level playing field. I mean, people that ripped on longboards sort of stood out on their own. Mm-hmm. Some of those names I already dropped. But yeah, I think you're right. There was a lot of camaraderie, and also longboarding had all these club events. Like right now, the board riders thing is making a huge comeback in the state of California, which they've been thriving in Australia for a long time. Mm-hmm. But up and down the coast are the board riders, and it's a shortboard thing. Mm-hmm. But man, 30, 40 years ago, the coalition of surf clubs was all longboarding. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And very, grassroots and community driven. And you really saw that spirit there that you just described.
Yep. So from Longboard Magazine, next up was your work with Thomas Campbell, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he, I guess, poached me in a way, but he really encouraged me to take a huge leap. It's something I wasn't ready to do. I was on year 5 at Longboard Magazine. I was hanging out with these young, hip, cool artists. So my tastes and the influences were happening. I was shooting photos, and it just happened to coincide that he was in the latter part of concluding the filming for Sprout. Mm-hmm. And Thomas and I had become friends through his project, the Seedling.
Okay.
And I think that's about the time I met you. You were in Encinitas at surfing.
Yep.
And he's like, come on. He's a very convincing guy. He can really charm the pants out of when he needs something to happen. He's like, come with me and you can shoot photos. And so we did this couple-month run of New Zealand, Australia, and that famous Indonesia boat trip with the Jerry Lopez boards and that whole part. So that was just the kind of the push I needed. Because sometimes when you feel stuck in something, you're afraid to get out of it. Mm-hmm. Especially in my younger years, I lacked confidence. I was always very quiet and shy, and took a long time to make decisions and for change to come about. Mm-hmm. So he's like, jump on board. And that began a couple-year career as a freelancer, which was completely hairball, because you go from having, even though I didn't make much money, I could rely, we all need money. Sorry, just the way it works, right? Yeah. And not knowing where it was coming from was frightening. Mm-hmm. But it was the best lesson in life. It was like a master's degree in survival. Mm-hmm. And you become scrappy. Yeah. And this is before the internet was a thing, and before digital was really, really taking place. I was shooting slide film, so I would do packages. I'd write these stories and shoot the photos and send them all around the world on, what were they called? CD-ROMs, or it was like the...
Yeah, I remember.
So I'd get my slides scanned professionally, because I didn't want to hand over the slides because they'd lose them or break them or scratch them. Mm-hmm. And pulled that off for a few years. But the problem was, at the end of every year for the few years there, I was about 10 grand upside down. Mm. It's like, shit, I really suck at this, or it's just really freaking hard. Mm-hmm. And just about that time I hit the end of that, I got a lifeline from the Malloy brothers, and they said, hey, we just jumped on board with Patagonia. Yvon Chouinard's really committed to bringing environmental consciousness to surfing, which wasn't really on people's radar for the most part. People did individually, of course. But from a brand voice perspective, it wasn't an initiative by anybody really that I'm aware of, at least at that time. And, I'm not like the most radical environmentalist, but I think just about any surfer could get on board with, oh, okay, I didn't know organic cotton made a difference. I didn't know about the runoff. I didn't know about any of that stuff, really. I just thought about recycling plastic was cool and pick up trash off the beach. And, hey, oil spills are lame. That's kind of, for most surfers, that was sort of the extent of it. But it was much deeper than that. So, I was like, I'm in. Let's do it. So I was there for 6 years. And that was another incredible learning experience.
And with your work at Patagonia, were you traveling as well? Were you doing similar trips to what you had done with Thomas?
Yeah, a few of them. I went on a trip it was the best trip probably of my life, I'd have to say now. Wayne Lynch, Jerry Lopez, the Malloy brothers, Jeff Johnson. Gosh, that was a heck of a treat. To listen to the stories of Wayne Lynch and Jerry Lopez was a mind blower. Like uncut, no bullshit, just all the real stories.
Yeah.
Whoa, this is great.
Yep. And so you're doing this work, but you're also, traveling to great waves and surfing with the best surfers in the world, the most interesting surfers in the world. I mean, a different group. It's not as if you were on the world tour and you're surfing with the world champions of the time, but more maybe alternative surfcraft folks, especially when it comes to Thomas's films. How much were you focused on the work that you had to do, and how much were you focused on your surfing and your passion for surfing?
I was still mostly focused on work was still the priority. Surfing, I was maybe even taking less and less seriously. It was just, I would try to surf every day if I could. I lived in Cardiff by the sea, and but it wasn't a priority. I wasn't trying to chase it like as though there was a living to be made from it. And I was also riding Donald Takayama surfboards. I think I was a team rider for about 25 years, if I have that math correct.
Wow.
20 or 25 years. He's the most generous person I've ever known and the most gifted shaper I've ever seen. The problem there was myself, my shy, timid nature to just accept. I would say, hey, Donald, I'm feeling this. And he'd be like, oh, no, don't worry about that. I'll take care of it. So there was no back and forth. And I couldn't do a whole lot about it because I didn't have the guts. I didn't know how to get through to Donald, and I didn't have the balls to leave because I loved him so much. It was weird.
Yeah.
So when he passed away, I was very devastated by that. But then it had this unexpected door opened. I reached out to Tyler Hatzikian, who was a longtime friend, and he made me a couple boards, and I can feel it right now, just the moment. I can getting goosebumps that like, whoa, the new feeling you get from a new board and a new sensation, like kissing the love of your life for the first time. That just like bam, and it reignited my excitement. It wasn't that I was over surfing. I was just going through the motions. I was like, okay, I'm 30, whatever. This is kind of it.
Yep.
I'll be like a decent, good local surfer, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But then getting that first hit, that first taste of what was possible, and then seeing what happened and feeling what happened with the surfing got me going. And so I got more boards from Tyler. I reached out to some other folks. I got some boards from Thomas Beckson and some other folks. I was still getting boards from Takayama. There'll always be family. I love those guys. That was probably just trying some other boards was number one. Number two was I had been married, and I was with someone who didn't love the surfing part of my life. They married me because I was a surfer and probably thought that was sexy and great. But then over the years, there was like a control element, and I sort of like surrendered to it. And so I put the aspirations to surf better and travel and do things sort of on the back burner. Then that relationship fell apart about the same time that Donald passed away. So there was these two
And what
major...
year was Donald's pass away?
It was like 2011 or 12.
Okay.
I'm really bad with the numbers, but yeah, somewhere around there. And it was like these two monumental shifts. So two different pathways or doors opened up that it was like, okay, getting the feelings from these boards, now you don't have this other sort of negativity or toxicity in your life that isn't helping propel you forward. And a year or two later, I met my wife, Caitlin, who loved all those things and wanted me to do more of it and really supported the surfing. Not like, oh, go be a pro surfer guy, but we surfed together and she loved doing that. And we shared that. And so it was just this like wind under the wings that I never, ever expected.
And at this time, you're living in North County, San Diego. You're a regular at Cardiff Reef.
Yes.
And so thinking about the boards from Tyler and other shapers and that time of having that that kind of burst, right? And you're in your 30s now. What were the feelings? And I think feelings, it's funny, feelings is like such a thing when I think about boards and surfing, and it seems almost like abstract or woo-woo. But what, to try to talk about it or to try to get at that. But I've seen you surf out there, and I've seen Joel surf out there, and I know the wave and how that wave works. What were the things that were happening that were really exciting you on the wave?
Well, a good board becomes an extension of what you're feeling. You know, I learned later that Al Merrick, I thought, put it in good perspective, which was he was there to bring the surfer's vision of what they wanted to do and that feeling. He was there to help them reach their goals and dreams. So there were certain lines and feels that I wanted to do, and there's two types of surfing. There was the longboard side, and then what people now call midlengths, which I actually think is a funny term. I didn't have anything to do with that name, and I rode eggs.
Right. I knew of them as eggs back then. Yeah.
But hey, look, it's bigger than us. Everyone uses the term mid-length, so let's just go with it. We're not going to change that and try to lecture people on the differences of the designs. But as a category, that mid-range board. So with longboards, very quickly, it was being able to ride higher and tighter in the pocket and dance more in the pocket. I really always loved Nat Young and Midget Farley and this surfing that was happening at the zenith of longboarding in 1966. I'm sorry if this is boring to anyone listening to this. They've heard this story a million times from different people, but the peak of longboarding was incredible. It was so beautiful and dynamic, and these guys were driving and surfing through the pocket, and they were nose riding, but it was very functional. They weren't up nose riding to pose, to stay on the nose as long as possible forever. They were really engaging with the pocket. So I was after that type of surfing, and some of the boards that Tyler and Thomas were doing allowed me to access that. So I was getting closer to a goal and a dream of mine than I'd ever been. So that was really exciting. So that side of the equation, check.
Yep.
The other side, Donald had given me one of his tri-fin eggs in the late 90s, 97, 98. Joel Tudor, who was on the team at the time, was doing a bunch of Wayne Lynch-inspired boards. He had one called the Flow Model, which I didn't care for. It was a single fin. And Donald's like, just get on the tri-fin. It's more your speed. Blew my mind. I was so stoked on it. Because I liked the movie Cosmic Children, and I always loved the surfing that was done at Honolulu Bay with Jeff Hackman and Barry Kanaiapuni at Sunset Beach. I think maybe some of it was Haleiwa. I can't quite remember. And I wanted to draw those kinds of lines. Even though I was a longboarder, I really wanted to draw those 70s lines. And that's what these egg boards did really well. So I really liked the Takayama ones that we had. I don't have any gripes about those boards. Those were actually my favorite. It was the longboards I had the most trouble with. So in the mid-length realm, Tyler had made me one, and then when I was over at Patagonia later, we made one called the Huevo Ranchero with Fletcher. It was a sick board. And those leaps were similarly to the longboard. I was able to tap into those lines that I'd always dreamed of from Cosmic Children. So it's interesting to have like these two sort of different lanes of surfing. You know, traditional longboarding's kind of its own thing. You could say that egg surfing shares some similarities because you're riding a low rocker board, which has its own sort of similar pacing with timing of catching waves and that whole idea of trim and high lines. And but the eggs were more exciting to me always. There was this bridge between what you could do on a short board, like guys your age, your era, that Tom Curran era, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
Which I thought was like peak shortboarding for me. I liked the sort of at the crossroads between hot generation longboard surfing and the surfing you and the guys were doing with Tom Curran. There was this middle ground there that the egg boards covered. And there were other people riding them. I by no means was anybody special. Lots of sort of underground characters would ride them, but they were largely considered kind of lame, like mislabeled as a fun board, as a kook board. But an egg, if it's coming from a Takayama or a Skip Fry, was a totally different plan shape, totally different ride. It wasn't about a bunch of rocker and a shortboard tail. It really was this sort of fuller outline with low rocker and V and utilizing a bunch of rail. Not tail surfing. The fun boards were a tail surfing board, more like a shortboard. And all that length was there was to catch the wave, and it had a bunch of banana rockers, so when you're at Manhattan Beach, when you get up and go straight down the wave, you don't pearl up to your neck. That was the whole purpose of those designs. And so, funny enough, I'd be at my favorite breaks, and I would surf in between the old guys on high-performance longboards and the young rippers on shortboards. I was able to sit in this middle ground underneath the outside guys, and a lot of times they would miss the wave, especially at a spot like Swami's. You know, that middle ground?
Sure.
Where our friend Michael Marks would like to sit.
Yeah.
And so that board, and I could do the same thing at lower trestles. Just sit a little bit in from the older guys on the really huge boards. And I was riding a 610 or a 7.0. And so, sorry, that was kind of a long answer to what you were asking, but there was these two different worlds and new feelings from that point in my life.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I think thinking about what the possibilities, but also the limitations of a bigger longboard, and then kind of scaling it down to what the egg or now the mid-length, having that more maneuverability, I guess, able to kind of, you were talked about playing in the pocket, which is really interesting. You also mentioned Skip Fry, and I was curious as to A, whether you've tried Skip's boards, and B, who Skip was in your education, if we can call it that.
Yeah, gosh, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, pretty significant. He was our North Star, any San Diego surfer really looked up to him. And I really didn't have access to his boards because he and Donald were like really good friends. And it just wouldn't have been cool. Donald was very protective of the people on his team. So again, after Donald had passed away, I did drive over to Skip's and I put in an order. This would have been around 2011 or 12 or something. And I was approaching 40 at this point. And I got his, I'm like, okay, if I could get one Skip, what is he really known for? And people call them gliders, but Skip calls them big boards. And his probably most well-known big board is called an Eagle. So I went all in. I went for the big boy. I went 11 foot. And he's like, well, we can get another inch or two out of this blank. You okay with that? I'm like, yeah, get every inch you can out of it. So that was a total mind blower. And Thomas Campbell rode them and had some in the late 90s, and I kind of scoffed at them. I was like, those are weird, like too big. I rode it, tried it. I wasn't that into it. But he was right. You know, he tapped into some magic that I kind of overlooked, and I got super into it for a couple years. The downside to those boards is they're massive wave harvesters, and they bum everyone out just every bit as much as an SUP. And so I would strive to ride them at times or places where I wouldn't bum out a bunch of people. I love those boards, but they can be a menace.
I see. Yeah. Well, North County, San Diego definitely has some of those waves, though, that are good for that type of board, and there's no one around because there's an abundance of those sort of reef breaks or what have you. When you speak of Skip as a North Star, what exactly are you getting at there? And I know he's beautiful to watch on a wave, but I think he represents more than that. What for listeners who don't know, what would Skip represent?
In some similar ways as the jock description I gave earlier, this boundless stoke, the idea that here's someone that's the blueprint if you want to surf to be at 100. He remains surf stoked. He'd be down on the beach every morning picking up trash. He kept a calendar of the surf conditions. He was very aware of what was happening with the surf. He had great recall and memory of the trends of surf conditions, and he would really get after it. Not so much in more recent years, but at peak Skip in his sort of 50s, if he went and did a contest, he could beat most of the people. He still was just really top of the game late in life. So that's one part of it, but he's most known for style and really stripped down minimalistic approach to surfing. No unnecessary movements. And so when you look at him, even if you don't understand what you're looking at, it's like watching someone do Tai Chi or Kung Fu in the park.
Beautiful.
And if you have no clue what they're doing, you're like, that is cool.
Yeah.
And so I think he had that appeal for definitely myself and a lot of others.
No, and I've witnessed it in action. That's a great description. Okay, so Channel Islands. Can you tell us sort of when you landed here and the development of the mid-length boards and your R&D with CI?
Yeah, like a lot of things in life, for all of us, right? Just very random things happen. The best things in life seem to be unplanned, at least for me. And so after the sort of Patagonia thing wrapped, I jumped in for a little while with this company called Spy Optics, and I continued to really hone in on sort of the mid-length type of surfing. I got more and more into it and just kept pulling that out more and actually longboarding a lot less. Because I'd been longboarding so long, it wasn't that I was tired of it. I was just putting more of my effort into eggs. I fast forward 2018. My wife and I now wife, we'd gotten married in 2017, and she's a fourth generation Venturan. And we met in San Diego because she was a farm manager. She was managing a 500-acre flower field in San Luis Rey. And that's near Fallbrook, if anyone doesn't know where that is, North San Diego County. And we knew we wanted to start a family. I was actually getting quite long in the tooth. I thought maybe I missed my opportunity to be a dad. The idea of an early 40s, mid 40s dad was like, whoa, is that a good idea? Is that going to be bad for the kids? Or, they're going to, at school, they're going to think that's grandpa picking them up and not their dad. But we got past that. And she's like, let's, I'd like to move home to start this family. I've got a friend network and a family network that would be really clutch. I was like, oh man, I don't know if I can leave Cardiff Reef. I've been here my whole life. I mean, we're talking about giving up set waves. That's a tall order. Any lifelong surfer, think about the break you've been out for 30 or 40 years and your wife convincing you to go 3 hours north to a completely, basically a foreign town and try to work your way back into things. That is daunting. But I love her dearly, and she has great wisdom, and it was a good call. We did it. I was freelance, doing a lot of freelance work at the time, a lot of consulting, and I saw an advertisement for a marketing director at Channel Islands. I'm like, I don't know if that's going to be a fit. I come from this longboard mid-length. Those guys are probably going to think I'm a kook and just some, hipster weirdo and totally write me off. I probably wouldn't even get an interview. That's where my head was at. But I'm not, what the heck? I'm going to throw it out there. It's 15 minutes away from where I live. I love surfboards. Maybe I can help them. Come up and do the tour. Got a tour through the building that you and I are in right now. And I'm just within the first 15 minutes, my mind had kind of changed. What I thought of them as this huge corporate beast, and it was just Willy Wonka factory, and it's going to be a bunch of robots in there. It's like, man, this is just, it's a bigger version of all the shops I've ever liked. And everyone here surfs. I can kind of be into this. And then we're walking through and I see all the history of the brand, which I was aware of, all the magazine covers, all the surfboards from every surfer you could imagine, Sean Thompson, Tom Curran, Dane Reynolds, the Malloys, on and on and on and on. And sat down and I got to meet Britt. I really liked Britt's vibe. I connected with him immediately. And we decided to all give each other a chance and go for it. And I've been here since.
And very quickly after that would have been the development of the mid-length, yeah?
Yeah, it was actually pretty quick. When I was first started, the Gadauskas brothers had just come out with a board called the Rocket Wide. So we had some fun with that. And off to the side was this little sort of mid-length project thing they were working on. And I looked at it, and I looked over at Britt, and I looked at the crew here, and I was like, can I say something? That board is awful. And they're like, really? How so? Because design's driven by whoever's in the building at the time.
Yeah.
Right? And so they're coming off of a 10-year stretch of just driving innovation with performance boards.
Sure.
Because if you remember back in the early 2000s, they had that Fish with Rob Machado. Mm-hmm. Mikey DeTemple had some longboard models. They were like full-on single fins. Machado had his single fin boards. Al had his Big Blue and his M13. Like, there's been a lot of different cool boards that have come through here. Mm-hmm. But they were just kind of on a tear with shortboards because everybody in the building was really focused on that. So I was maybe the first person in a while that was like, excuse me, man, I've got a point of view here that I think could be helpful. So, and to their credit, they were totally open to it. I was like, shit, well, this would be great. I'm here to do marketing and help tell the story of the brand, which I don't need to get in the way of. The story is incredible. From Al to Britt to this team and everything, all the world titles, and everyone knows the story. But yeah, so we did a couple versions of that, and we were basically able to marry what I'd learned through Donald Takayama and that whole world and all the people I'd been involved with. I could go down a list of other boards I've ridden, but that's not necessary. And kind of married it with the Merrick rail and the Merrick bottom. And coincidentally, we had found, I was going through some archives and I said, wait a minute, look at these boards you guys made in the early 70s. This is what we need to be doing. So we jumped on those outlines, took some curves and rockers that I was into and talking with Britt and the guys here, came up with the CI mid and did, I don't know, a dozen versions. And then the whole goal of the board was to make a better egg, really. But this term mid-length came into the conversation.
Yep.
And so it was just kind of a souped-up hot rod. It was like, if you were a guy in your 40s who'd been shortboarding your whole life and you wanted to try a mid-length, it's a pretty big leap to go all the way to like an ironing board, panel V, not very user-friendly board. You'd hate it. So that this was sort of in between the shortboard and like a really sort of hardcore traditional egg board.
And then, so you were involved in the R&D of it, and then you also became kind of you became synonymous with the board in so many ways. And I watched it, and it was really a joy to see. It was, you were kind of, what's the word? Moving forward this design, and then also appearing in clips and writing it in a way that inspired many people to get them.
Yeah, you know it. Maybe just there was no one else in the building to ride them. So I'm like, hey, we'll get some videos for R&D really, and show the crew like proof of concept. Hey, check it out, the board works. And then it was kind of like, maybe we should put this on Instagram and YouTube, and they just sort of took on a life of their own. And I just think that it's a type of surfing that has always been around. It's nothing new. It just didn't have a kind of a mainstream spotlight on it. And I think the democratization of surf media allowed it to happen because
well said.
Yeah, look, Instagram's been around, I don't know what year it came out, 2011 or 12, I think
Something
was when
like
it
that,
first
yeah.
popped up.
Yeah.
And it was a fun thing if you were Facebook was a place where people would complain about politics and family. But Instagram was cool because it was more art focused, where initially it was just kind of like photos, and then you could do these 15-second videos or something. And now people were able to learn about a lot of different types of surfing that didn't have to go through any gatekeeping. Obviously, print magazines were winding down and kind of slowly going away. The Journal, of course, never did. They've always just been there and covered everything. But your sort of Transworld Surf and Surfing, certainly, and eventually Surfer, they all just kind of went BK or closed the doors or whatever happened.
Yeah.
And around that time, was that 2016, 17, they were all gone. So yeah, the people were learning about Torrin Martin and all these other interesting characters that, I don't know, maybe the magazines would have put that stuff in there, but I highly doubt it.
Yeah.
And YouTube, Instagram was how people were learning about these other types of surfing.
Yes, for sure. And I also think watching the World Tour, looking at the WCT top 10, for instance, there's a very specific type of surfing, and it's almost the more high performance it gets, the more unattainable it gets for a lot of people. For watching Italo hurl some air thing and some close out that like most of us, our knees wouldn't even want to go near. There was almost an aligning of the stars or a zeitgeist or what have you that sort of opened the door for more of this. And of course, like Torrin Martin played a big role. And then also, Mikey February, who I know you've worked with, and I know he's like, watching Mikey on the Twin Pin is a real joy, and that's one of the boards that you've been involved in the development. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with Mikey?
Yeah, well, I met him here, of course, through Channel Islands. He's been a team rider through the South Africa team since he was quite young. And I think he might have been on the World Tour when I started here, or just kind of wrapping that up and embarking on that embarking on the Free Surfer, which is a freelance, I guess, in a way. But and he has been a real treat to be around because of his ability to adapt to surfboards. And a lot of people will make a comment, he's so good he could ride a door. He's so good, which is probably true. I'm not going to argue with that. But when people make those comments, I think what they don't mean to say this, but what they don't understand is that these surfers don't ever want to ride a door.
Yeah.
They only want to ride the best. They hate shitty surfboards with a passion. It is such a bummer for them. So knowing that Mikey wants to ride the best, and that he had these other outside influences. He was really interested in what Mark Richards' boards were. He was interested in the Campbell brothers, and he was really into like 70s style surfing. And so he wanted to draw those kinds of lines in a more radical way. So he brought some of these ideas forth to Britt. Not really, my part in any of this was really only being a fly on the wall. But the Twin Pin specifically was like, hey, he was saying this, I really like the Mark Richards Twin Fin. He really loved it. But it has some limitations when the waves get really good and cranking. I'd really like to have a twin fin that I could push when the waves are really good. So think 8 foot plus faces in Indo, just roping point breaks, being able to drive as hard as you want off the bottom, do the biggest turns, and know that those fins aren't going to fail you. And anyone who's really put a lot of time into twin fins knows there have been limitations on a lot of the designs.
Yes, for sure.
And certainly not going to say, oh, no one's ever done what Mikey did, but we didn't have anything like that at Channel Islands at the time. We've had lots of twin fins that are killer. So Britt really took on the project, and I think what was helpful for the board to get the grip and do the things it did was to go with Panel V.
What is Panel V exactly?
So Panel V is between the fins. the stringer is higher than sort of where the edge is on the rail. And if you were to put a straight edge on it, you would see it would be more or less a straight line from that high point on the stringer to the rail.
Okay.
And now what most people do is they'll either have no V in there, they'll have a giant single concave, which is what a lot of performance shortboarders like a Dane Reynolds loves that. Or some of the boards you would have liked, like the Flyer and all the boards you rode in the 80s that Al shaped, would have had that double barrel concave.
Yeah.
So there'd be that high stringer, but between the stringer and the edge, it's scooped out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And going rail to rail, that's just the best feeling. And you get the lift, but it rolls over nicely. And now that concave was really good for the twin fin and the small surf. And Mikey really liked it. But it didn't quite go where he wanted it to when the waves were like 8 to 10 foot faces.
Yeah.
Not Hawaiian.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know exactly where the idea came from. I feel like somehow Tom Curran was involved in this, but I don't want to be misspeak here. But there was this idea of, well, let's try panel V, because anybody that shapes or knows about bigger wave boards, there's a lot of surfers that ride bigger waves, like the Sunset Beach guys. They like that panel V because it doesn't do anything too weird. It doesn't lift up out of the water too much. You don't want to be out of the water on a double to triple overhead wave. You want that connection and grip so that when you give it all you've got, it isn't going to rise up and buck up out of the water. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, for
How
sure.
sometimes the concaves can do that.
Yes.
So that was the magic of that board. So to answer your question, it was just really fun to watch the process and how seriously Mikey February took it. Like, the guy has a real sense of pride and a real curiosity in great surfboards. And he may not be able to articulate it at the level of a David Rostovich, but he was able to really articulate the feelings. And Britt was really good at sort of like decoding what he was saying. Well, it's really boggy here and it lifts up and does this here. Because not every surfer is going to break down the real technical shaper terms.
Yes.
You have to listen to what they're saying and also watch video clips.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, okay, now I understand what he means by bogging. Because bogging is a different meaning to different surfers. Dane's bogging is a little different than Mikey's bogging. So it was fun to sort of be a fly on the wall on that. And then throwing him on the midlength was really cool because, okay, well, this guy's into all types of surfing. Let's see what would Mikey February do on this.
Yeah.
And he wrote it at Jeffreys Bay, and the most views at Channel Islands YouTube ever in history is Mikey February on one wave on a mid-length at Jeffreys Bay. It's very interesting, and I think it's really telling of some of the things we were saying earlier, like what are people, sort of globally speaking, what are the majority of people drawn to when they think of surfing?
Yeah.
And somehow that told us that, and this is nothing against the core surfers or people that want to rip and do the CT. We love that. That's what we're here for. That's what drives us. But it's very interesting that Channel Islands, known for to be the most high performance brand, also has this guy that rode a mid length that was just moving and grooving at high speed, but doing this beautiful surfing of kind of like an era that's been lost.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
and bringing that back to the forefront. And I don't know, it's 800,000 views, which for us, we'd never seen anything like that. It's really cool.
Yeah. So in your experience as a surfer in the present day right now, who are the surfers that most inspire you and inform what you do?
Well, we have to go back to the two buckets. On the longboard side of things, there's several. I really enjoy watching the surfing of Kai Salas. He's a South Shore Waikiki guy.
Okay.
And I really like him because he kind of reminds me of like a Barry Kanaiapuni, but of longboarding. He's got all the power of all the great Hawaiian surfers have had. But he also has this cat-like balance and grace that's every bit of like the perfect form of longboard surfing to me anyways. Traditional longboard surfing.
Yeah.
I think he's fantastic. I really enjoy a younger Australian named Kai Ellis Flint. He really is an extension of that Australian type of surfing I mentioned earlier that I really liked at the zenith of longboarding in '66. Really a kind of a next gen version of that Nat Young, Midget Farley kind of a mashup.
Yep.
I think is really bitchin'. Those are probably the two main ones that excite me. And there's a whole host of others. There's a young guy from down south, San Clemente. He goes by Gato-san on Instagram. Since we name people by their Ian Gatrone.
Yeah.
And I think he's, represents the next generation that's sort of onboarding all these things I've been talking about and really pushing things. And I always enjoyed Harrison Roach, and Justin Quintal. So I can go on and on and on there. And how can I leave out Cassia Meador? She's like my favorite.
Yes.
I love watching her surf. Everything about her, surfing with her in person, any clip I see, I watch every second of it. I think she's fantastic because even though she's quite a bit younger than me, she's very similar to me in this like slow burn approach to life, which is she's not stopping and she's still curious about surfboards. We were just talking in the parking lot 2 days ago at Malibu about the board I had under my arm. She was checking it out. It's this CI Nose Rider Wayne Rich thing. She had her Dane Peterson. By the way, another guy, I've ridden his boards. Those were fantastic back in years ago. And here we are. I'm 51. I don't know how old she is. She's 43 or 4 or something like that.
Something like that.
And I feel like she's surfing the best she ever has.
Yeah.
So that's very inspiring to me.
Yep. When you mentioned Cassia and a lot of the surfers you've mentioned, and Skip, and certainly Jock Sutherland, I think there's a kind of athletic prowess. There's a thing in the body. There's a thing of fitness and dexterity and all those terms. But then there's also a thing of attitude and a thing of just an ethos, a way of moving through the world. And there's a through line with all of them. Let's talk about that, because I think you'd mentioned to me earlier, this was off audio, but you mentioned wanting to surf to the age of 100. And I think that's what does that entail?
I still don't totally know. Andrew Huberman and all these optimization experts will tell us I need to be weightlifting. There's a lot of things I could probably change in my diet. There's lots of those things that need to be done. I know, but I have lots of excuses. I'm not doing those things. I've been doing the moderation approach, which was I somehow survived without ever being a drug addict. I think that's been helpful. I smoked a little bit of weed here and there. I've imbibed some alcohol for sure, but nothing ever. I never got addicted or out of hand. I do have probably 8 or 10 pounds of dad weight. I've got 3 young children, but that's just from finishing their plate, which I shouldn't do. And so I think not doing drugs or hard alcohol is a big thing. I look around at all my other 51-year-old friends that I grew up with. The vast majority of them are really out of shape and have really just given up.
Yeah.
The attitude piece of it is huge. The not focusing on and telling yourself, I'm old. I feel like putting that out there reinforces that and will bring about your demise much quicker. I also think that not being a good shortboarder, not shortboarding, actually saved my surfing the best for last because it's so hard on your body.
Yeah.
Like pro skaters, they just get so wrecked. A lot of the really good shortboarders are kind of hobbling around because it's a lot of twisting and torquing, and it's really hard. And so when you're surfing at the highest levels of the highest pros, it's so easily recognizable how far you've fallen from that when you get to your 50s.
Sure.
Where I might be undercutting my whole thing here, but being just truthful, riding longboards in mids doesn't destroy your body like that.
Yeah.
Therefore, you can do it, I think, a lot longer at that higher level that you want to be at. That's why, like Jock Sutherland, Michel Junot is another guy. There's a lot of these surfers that most of their life rode longer, bigger boards. And so there was a lot more trimming and, let's just say it, easier surfing, easier on the body.
Yeah, less fast twitch kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think just being kind to the body and that it just kind of got lucky. It wasn't like a plan. And so I think that's part of it. And then I think having love in your life is really important. Having a wife that loves you and really supports you and doesn't see surfing as like this bad thing and like, oh, you're staying away from the family. Like I actually surf a lot less now because I have a 4.5-year-old son, a 3-year-old daughter, and a 1.5-year-old daughter. And if I'm not working, I want to spend every second with them and my wife. So I surf a lot less, but when the waves are really good, my wife's like, you need to go surfing. And so having that and knowing that I want to get home quickly to those people, I don't know, just being around kids, man, I don't, it's such a cliche, but you're sort of forced to be young because you don't want to be I'm 51, as I said, I'd come home and be like, oh, sorry, son, I'm too tired to roll around and wrestle with you. That is lame. I can't do that. So I like, it's like energized me, man. It's not a profound statement I'm making here. I'm just stating the obvious, but having the family and the wife and the kids all ties back to the longevity of surfing because I don't want to force my kids to surf, but they're going to swimming lessons. They ask about surfing. They stand on my surfboard. They're really curious about it. And my wife likes to surf. So if we end up all doing this together, which I hope is the game plan here, there's the fourth act.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Devon, on that note, I think I've asked everything I've wanted. I think I've hit all the things I wanted to hit. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't touched on?
No, I don't think so. I'm just stoked you reached out, and I think look, the world's a crazy place out there, and I think we are so lucky to have surfing.
Yeah.
You know, you and I can't change the course of politics and what's happening out there. But we can control what goes on in our home. We can control how we act and behave in the water, which I could always do better at. I'm sure we all can. And while some people think we're on the precipice of the worst of times, I'm very optimistic that we're on the beginning of the best times because I have children and I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
I am a part owner and work at a surfboard company. We make toys for people to have fun. So we don't see any other way forward other than being excited and optimistic. And so I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's the only thing I would add. And I think that's what's going to carry through to surfing to 100.
Wonderful. Thank you, Devon.
Thank you.
Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal and is produced by me, Jamie Brissick, and Jonathan Shiflett. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Our theme song is Give Me a Wave by Oscar Matsumiya and Paz Len Chanton. The Surfer's Journal is a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Costa Sunglasses, Finisterre, Freefly, Howler Brothers, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. The journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. This episode of Soundings has been presented by Rainbow Sandals. From day one, Rainbow has lived by a simple principle. If something's worth making, it's worth keeping. That's why they stand behind a philosophy of repair, reuse, and recycle. Even beyond the warranty, Rainbow will clean, repair, and donate your used sandals to someone in need. We'd like to thank Rainbow Sandals for their proud support of this podcast. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.